Should I lead?
Sure, go for it. I'm just pulling up my notes, so yeah,
Yeah,
please do
so
the honors.
we've got My Wild and Reckless Youth, which is about Eliezer when he was a wee lad. And he apparently tried to come up with an explanation for neurons that involved quantum gravity. And he considers this to be like one of his greatest mistakes, or possibly his greatest mistake, which, sure, if you're Eliezer. Um,
I'm sure there have
I
been
think
worse
by
mistakes made since then.
well, there's a post way later on in the sequences about like my best and worst mistake or something, and this wasn't it. I think this is just an example of him totally failing to reason properly.
yeah,
But
no,
you
I
know,
think it was hyperbolic, but basically, yeah, that was his sin. Was he described it as using a mysterious answer to explain a mysterious question, which he had been leading up to in some of the previous sequences as well. He
Yeah.
said this was because he was a devoted capital T traditional capital R rationalist, uh, and he had not yet known the way of Bayes, which was also capitalized.
Yes. He says that even after he invented his answer, in quotes, the phenomenon was still a mystery unto me and possessed the same quality of wondrous impenetrability that it had at the start.
Yeah, um, I'm a bit like I sort of wish he had explained what he meant by traditional rationality. I'm pretty sure he just means the scientific method, the sort of norms of thinking philosophically or scientifically, like at that point in time.
yeah, I got that. I think that's the impression I got as
Yeah,
well.
if you're
I get
contra-
the feeling, yeah, I get the feeling it's like what people think of the like Victorian era people with beakers and writing in scientific journals and just using very formal language and doing the best they can at the time, but it's moved on since that point, and some people are still more in that mindset of if I just follow the rules of science, everything will be scientific.
I think that's way more traditional than what he was talking about. But
Okay.
like normally when someone's contrasting something against Bayesian reasoning, I think of frequentist, which
Or even just like Popperian style falsification, right?
Yeah.
Like the science you're taught in school,
right.
rather than the science you're taught in school plus the actual ways to think about stuff.
He does specifically mention that falsification thing. He said in this quote I pulled, as a traditional rationalist, the young Eliezer was careful to ensure that his mysterious answer made a bold prediction of future experience. But my hypothesis made no retrospective predictions. According to traditional science, retrospective predictions don't count, so why bother making them? To a Bayesian, on the other hand, if a hypothesis does not today have a favorable likelihood ratio over I don't know, it raises the question of why you today believe anything more complicated than I don't know.
That is a very, I mean, it doesn't sound like a good soundbite, but that's a really good soundbite.
I think it's a good soundbite. I
It's a bit.
remember. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say it's a bit long for one, but yes, go ahead. Sorry. This is the problem with Skype. It's much harder to
Yeah.
do this. Next episode, we'll all be back in one room again. Thank God.
Hey, get to see your
Woot.
new digs.
Hells to the yes.
I was put in mind of. I can't remember the exact quote, but there was a part of Methods of Rationality where Harry's asking Hermione, "Do you know the scientific method?" And she's like, "Of course I know the scientific method." And you state a hypothesis, you do a test, you weigh the results, and then you make a cardboard. What was it, like a cardboard display?
Yeah.
Just cracked me up because I was thinking of science fairs and the like very very formulaic scientific
Yep.
method that children are taught. But Eliezer would probably be glad to know that, I mean, at least in the field of medicine and specifically like pharmacodynamics, uh, they do hire Bayesian statisticians to crunch a bunch of numbers on the feasibility of different study designs. They do look at the past knowledge that you'd be building upon. So I don't really know, and it would be interesting to find out what sequence of events led up to people updating in this way. Honestly, I think it's probably just capitalism. Like, inventing drugs that work is more profitable than not inventing
Yeah.
drugs that work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it hasn't failed to, or it hasn't, we haven't been able to stop companies from like greedily waiting until patents expire and then taking the same molecule and adding a methyl group that doesn't do anything and then relabeling it something new and doing all new branding stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Lunesta.
that's also a technique, right?
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that at least in pharmacological chemistry, what'd you say it was called?
Pharmacodynamics, or yeah, you could just say like big pharma.
Pharmacodynamics. That's a well, at least in the field of big pharma, it sounds like one rationalist technique is winning because it actually works.
Yes.
Absolutely. And do you know how long they've been doing this? Because I know the sequences are like 12 years old now.
I don't know. I only got into the field like last year.
Okay.
You mean your boot camp didn't include a history of the field?
Oh, they
They had
did.
to take for.
Oh no!
No, I told you about
Well, you
some of the
forgot
history
you forgot
of
all
the
the
field.
useless shit.
The boot camp was, if you remember, like Slate Star Codex, rest in peace. I'm doing a like genuflection, but you can't see it. uh, there was the it was called My IRB Nightmare. We can link to the probably Wayback Machine version of that, but they're talking about it was Scott like kind of deciding I want to do a research. I'm a smart person. I can do this, and then running into all of the terrible, terrible, terrible like regulations from the federal level and
Oh yeah.
yeah, the review board. Uh, a lot of
And all
my,
he really wanted to do was give a survey to some people, right?
yeah, but
And that was unethical.
it's because and my boot camp crunched this into us as well. The history of clinical trials is paved with blood, or paved. I don't know, painted. I tried to do a metaphor and it didn't work, but yeah, there's lots of unethical trials that were done in the past, and now in order to make sure this never, ever, 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 ever happens again, we have to put like 7,000 bureaucracies in charge of everything.
As long as there's no trials ever again, there won't be any unethical trials. It's like the cruelty to elephants problem.
I did like a small scale, I don't know what I guess psychology experiment when I was an undergrad, and had to get board approval for that.
Oh, you had to
And
get
like
an
the
IRB.
only risk, yeah, the only risk to patients or risk to subjects was like possible emotional distress or something.
Yeah, I love the. There's some trials that are just so minimally. I wanted to say minimally invasive. I don't think that's the right term, but there's such little risk of danger, but you still have to list everything that could possibly happen, and then you're also required to list the alternatives to participating in this study, which Scott pointed out in his post. The only alternative that I and like the woman that was supervising him could really agree on was not participating in this study. I've seen that one a bunch of times too. I mean, like working with cancer, there's less of the. I mean, like your alternatives are, well, I could die. The
Yeah.
referencing the meme of the old man shrugging. Well,
It's easy to get people to sign off on it.
well, yeah.
That reminds me, this is a super apropos post to lead us into today's topic.
Yeah.
Because he goes on to say,
Yeah.
like, I'm skimming a bit through just so we can work through it, but when I think about how my younger self carefully followed the rules of traditional rationality in the course of getting the answer wrong, it sheds light on the question of why people who call themselves rationalists do not rule the world. You need one hell of a lot of rationality before it does anything but lead you into making new and interesting mistakes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
So-
just before that, he said that he's lucky he was at least a traditional rationalist because that let him dig himself back out of the hole. Because without it, he would have been totally screwed. But as he said, traditional rationality still wasn't enough to get it right. It just led me into different mistakes than the ones I had explicitly forbidden.
Yeah. That was the next article, but let's move on to the other one because they tie into each other.
Oh, wait,
Yeah,
wait.
there's one more thing I wanted to pull out of this one too.
Yeah.
Where he talks about how, and this is actually why I didn't pursue. I mentioned I got my undergraduate degree in psychology. This is why I didn't pursue the field because I wouldn't get to pick the problem and I'd get to spend 5 years
Right.
digging into something
That's
that
what I
probably
was
wasn't
going
a thing.
to pull out.
And yeah, and he says that the way traditional rationality is designed, it would have been acceptable for me to spend 30 years of my life, or 30 years on my silly idea, so long as I succeeded in falsifying it eventually, and was honest with myself for what my theory predicted, and accepted the disproof when it arrived, etc. This is enough to let the ratchet of science click forward, but it's a little harsh on the people who waste 30 years of their lives.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wish that traditional rationality or whatever, the paradigm at the time was, had allowed people to do that for 30 years just in good faith, because often I think what happens is that people refuse to accept their results, so they would screw around with the statistics or like do unethical study design things that makes it look like, oh, look, we did find evidence for telekinesis.
Well,
Looking at you, Zimbardo.
it's yeah, no, absolutely. But it's also, I mean, you can kind of understand how it might be really hard for someone to accept that they've spent their basically entire productive adult life on something which turns out to be completely wrong. Like, my life is a waste.
I think that it's not a waste. I mean, like, I think that there's the worst case scenario is that you did decide to pursue something silly and you were really stuck on it. So ideally, like, science would incorporate the Bayesian priors, Bayesian thinking, uh, in deciding what you're going to pursue. But then also, there was the whole, I feel like I keep bringing it up too, but the replication crisis, uh, scare quotes, which I'm not scare quoting it because it wasn't a thing, but just because of the really melodramatic title. But if there was more prestige to be had in replicating and falsifying or adding evidence to previously like established work, then that would be excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, it would give a lot of people
Yeah, I
jobs.
think things are ratcheting in that direction.
I think they,
I don't know how much money there is in that, but there are attempts at journals that like I will publish the results no matter my findings, and then they'll accept the grant money, do the experiment, because there's also like publication bias where you only publish positive results, and at least there are moves in the last decade or so to better that situation.
yeah, it became like it was the scientific community was well aware of the fact that it had this issue, and I'm really happy to have in my lifetime seen them taking a lot of really positive strides towards dealing with it. But the whole system had been stacked against actually figuring out the truth previously. It was like, if you're in academia, then you have to publish. If you're someone that has to publish, then you want to publish positive results because you won't get published if it's something negative. So you gotta skew your data or find like a new thing that no one's ever done before, which good luck with that. All the low hanging fruit has been picked already.
Yeah, most of the easy to find answers have been found.
It's hard.
$20 bill on the street, etc.
I want to say that, like, it's no, it's nothing to be ashamed of to spend 30 years working on something just to end up proving that this one potential avenue turned out to be incorrect. You've still, like you said, ratcheted science forward and improved knowledge. And that is very much the way I felt about things up until maybe a year ago. But now, I also realize that there is time pressure to get this stuff done.
Yeah.
If we want to secure aging or whatever it is our goal is before our death, we kind of want to avoid wasting 30 years of anyone's life, because there's a limited amount of people that have the ability and the inclination to do this sort of thing, and they have a limited amount of time to do it in. So not wasting time as much as possible is a huge benefit.
God, there was some other Slate Star Codex article, and I can't remember the name of this one. Maybe one of you will, or I'm sure one of our listeners will. Where was it? Now I'm like sort of doubting myself about whether this was Slate Star Codex or somewhere on LessWrong. But this sounds like a Scottism, talking about how many years go into the training of every scientist, how each field becomes more and more and more and more specialized as we gain more knowledge, and then the amount of time it takes you to absorb all the knowledge of all the previous generations working on it, like, eh.
Yeah.
Like, you've only got however many productive years. Like, if you're, getting your doctorate by the time you're in your 40s or whatever.
Yeah, we got to fix this aging thing, man, so we can keep doing more better stuff.
For real.
It's such a waste every time someone dies.
Yeah. Fuck death. But
Exactly. Anyways, we should continue on to failing to learn from history.
I was just going to say that that was the second post that we sort of already summarized, but didn't really mention the name
Yeah,
of.
it's basically just a continuation of the previous post, and like honestly, I pulled so many quotes from here, and it's such a short post that I think I pulled like 40% of it. But
Go
I
for
don't
it.
know. I guess I'll. All right, I'll jump forward. He says that my younger self did not realize that solving a mystery should make it feel less confusing. I was trying to explain the mysterious phenomenon, not render it into a mundane phenomenon.
Hmm. Yeah, I when I read that, I was reminded of my own idiot child self reading a bunch of Madeline the Engle books. Which, by the way, Madeline the Engle's a great writer, but one of the things she did was trying to reconcile Einstein's theories with religion,
Mm,
and that was a trap for little me. So I remember I was actually telling Phoenix about like remember when you had to like cover your textbooks or like you'd have to pay the damage. So I would cover all my textbooks with just brown paper bags because my family was poor, and then I would like
right.
write all over them. And I had all these like books that had equations trying to prove various stupid things using Einstein's theories, and I didn't even know any math. Like I knew, up until like a middle school age math and probably a little bit like advanced knowledge of like physics and biology, but I was just making a bunch of shit up, throwing numbers around, and I was like, "Look, I've proved I don't know telekinesis." I keep
Hmm.
for some reason defaulting to telekinesis because it's a funny word. But I was like showing my other fellow classmates, and they're like, "Wow, you're smart." I was just like, "Yeah, I'm a genius now." But yeah, they're like, I actually really like that line where if you notice
Yeah,
you're still confused about something, like that, the idea of noticing your confusion, I think, is a huge, important concept
yeah,
that the rationalist community, or Eliezer in particular, has really sort of crystallized.
yeah. I like the idea of, making something mundane. If it still feels mysterious, you haven't really answered it. And like he points out that um, that's a reason some people don't think science can solve things because they're taught about I don't have the exact quote here, but as children they're taught about stars and biology and how the planets work, and it all just seems so mundane because you already have the answers, right? Like, oh, okay, it's gravity. The things travel in circles because they're pulled towards each other. All right, and he says these were all incredibly mysterious, wondrous things, and now they feel mundane. But nobody lived through that conversion, so when they find new, mysterious, wondrous things, they don't think of the correct way to get it into science is to make it feel that mundane way. I
I,
think.
uh,
Oh, go ahead.
our, I don't know, like, I think our generation, the one after as well, are just like, I know I always feel incredibly lucky to have been born when I was because I got to watch the birth of the internet, cell phones, microprocessors, like getting more and more complex, and just the birth of like really simple AI till like GPT-3. Like
Oh my God, we got to do
we,
an episode on that at some point.
yeah. Oh, I have a couple of
Hey, if
people in
any,
mind who would be good hosts if they'd be willing to record their voices.
excellent. Then let us reach out to one.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the mundanity of science or like the explanation of the universe, you flip on a light and you're not amazed that the room is illuminated. Like that all just comes from it's not that the average person knows how that works. The average person knows they're closing a circuit and that makes electricity go or something, right? And that's about all I know. But like even though it's unknown to me, it doesn't seem like a compelling mystery because I know in my head that it is understood, and that makes it like somehow less interesting.
Hmm.
It's and I think this is a common thing for people who have no interest in science at all, and they just get this sense of blandness about it, and that's why like I really like the poetic writings of science from like Carl Sagan and Richard Dawkins, as well as I know I've plugged this book before, but A Short History of Nearly Everything.
Hmm.
I'm forgetting the author's name right now, but
Bryson.
it. Yes, Bill Bryson. Is that it?
Yep. I also recommend that
Yes,
one.
thank you.
It really
Yeah,
it really digs into the history of us learning stuff as a species.
and it gives you some scope of like I think it'd be a better scope might be like a long history of chemistry or something. If there's a book like that, that would do a better job of doing this feeling. But this does it in a lighter dose of trying to imagine what it was like not knowing this stuff.
It's
Um,
like I.
like, where the hell do mountains come from?
It's so
Like that
entertaining to
sounds like such a
read.
stupid question to ask, and yet it's a how that very mundane phenomena was understood uh, took a long time. Tectonic theory is, was not popular when your parents were in school. It's I think I mentioned a few episodes ago, I think it was this podcast, that the extinction of the dinosaurs by meteorite wasn't accepted until the late
Did
80s.
I tell you guys? I probably said this on the podcast before, but I found a I found a book of my dad's that had these illustrations of dinosaurs that just looked incredibly derpy, like they were like inflatable, uh, and it like just had this one chapter about dinosaurs and said that they like lived however many years ago. They were giant reptiles. They that grew to enormous proportions due to like a brief abundance of resources on the earth after the flourishing of plants or something like that. But then they quickly grew too large to be able to sustain themselves and died out. And I
Uh,
remember being a child, I was a dinosaur nut when I was a kid. I was one of those kids that had like one of every dinosaur toy, and I could like ramble all the facts about like, do you know about Parasaurolophus? No one knows what the horn in the back of its head is for. It might actually just be like for a mate display, but it might be for amplifying the sound of their calls. I don't care, kid. Who are you? Go away. But like, I read that and I was just in tears. Like I was rolling on the floor laughing. I was like, I tried to explain to my dad why that was funny. He's just like, oh, I don't know, whatever. My dad, by the way, who like still doesn't believe in global warming or science-based medicine. So
well, that sucks.
one of the best things,
Yeah.
though, about living in this time is that my dad can grumble about science all he wants, but like every few months there's some other cool technology that I can be like, hey, dad, look, my phone can talk back to me now. And he's like, nah, whatever.
Science still doesn't exist.
Ghosts in the phone.
Can I read like sort of a longer pull?
Please.
All right.
Go ahead and you can read out the rest of your polls if you
Yeah,
want.
do the
Okay.
pulls.
So he goes, I thought the lesson of history was that astrologists and alchemists and vitalists had an innate character flaw, a tendency towards Mysterianism, which led them to come up with mysterious explanations for non-mysterious subjects. But surely, if a phenomenon really was very weird, a weird explanation might be in order? It was only afterward, when I began to see the mundane structure inside the mystery, that I realized whose shoes I was standing in. Only then did I realize how reasonable vitalism had seemed at the time. How surprising and embarrassing had been the universe's reply of, life is mundane and does not need a weird explanation. We read history, but we don't live it. We don't experience it. If only I had personally postulated astrological mysteries and then discovered Newtonian mechanics, postulated alchemical mysteries and then discovered chemistry, postulated vitalistic mysteries and then discovered biology. I would have thought of my mysterious answer and said to myself, no way am I falling for that again.
Good pull. And
That is, it's also worth disappointing everybody that, like, he has that line, a tendency towards Mysterianism with a lowercase m, that is, in some small circles, a capital M. I know that one of my first introductions to philosophy was a course of lectures by Colin McGinn, and that's his, like, explanation for consciousness, that it's so complicated that there's no reason to assume that our weak monkey brains will ever understand it.
Oh, dude, there's a lot of people like that around. I run into them
Yeah.
a fair bit.
Oh, I know, but he calls it Mysterianism with a capital M.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, like he wholeheartedly embraces the mysterious answer. I mean, it's not a mysterious answer as in like, well, it's magic, but it's a pointless answer and as in, well, it's impossible for us to get it. But it's like he doesn't understand that people thought that about all kinds of things, and now we get them, right?
yeah, didn't
Yeah.
somebody say that about like, what was it?
You're thinking of life and being able to move your hand and stuff. What was his name? Kelvin.
Yeah, I'm thinking of probably Lord Kelvin, who just really liked to jerk off to how fucking mysterious everything was.
Hey, man, that's everybody.
I
Almost everybody.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think the thing that makes rationalists weird is, or I don't know.
I remember when I was a kid, like, in the single digits, I really liked the X-Files because of the whole, like, I want to believe in the mysteriousness of mysteries everywhere, you know?
Oh, I was super
And like,
into paranormal shit too, but like I like bought all these books and then I needed to find out if it was really true.
mm,
I mean, I did the same thing with religion.
and
Like
there was your downfall.
yeah, but I mean like it was just if something's like everybody's talking up how mysterious it is and how no one can know and I'm just like, but what do we know? And then I better weigh all the evidence. Yeah, that's probably why rationalists are weird.
You were too inclined to question things too early.
Well, I wanted to believe
You
in
know,
all this stuff, and now,
yeah, your mistake was looking into it,
yeah,
right? Assuming that what you wanted was to actually believe this. What it seems like your brain ended up really wanting was to understand what was going on.
yeah, so I could manipulate
Yeah.
it. Like, if psychic powers existed, then like, why the fuck didn't I have them yet? And how do I initiate that? You know, if there's ghosts, then I need to find out where to find them and how I can like harness their powers to have a ghost ray or something. I think most people just aren't ambitious enough.
I agree.